Dr. Minji brushed dust from the ancient metal panel, her heart racing as symbols appeared beneath the debris. 3 months of digging through the ruins on this frozen world had led to this moment. The dead planet circled silently beyond Pluto, far from Earth's warm light. "Taehyun, come look at this," she called to her research partner. The young archaeologist hurried over, his boots crunching on the ice-covered ground. The symbols glowed faintly as Minji connected her translation device. Slowly, words began forming on her screen. Not the usual trade records or cultural texts they expected to find, but something far more disturbing. "Battle formations," Taehyun read aloud, his voice barely a whisper. "Weapon specifications, tactical manuals." He looked up at Minji with wide eyes. "These aren't myths or stories, these are instruction guides." Minji's hands shook as she scrolled through page after page of military data. The database contained detailed records of something called humans, who had fought wars across entire star systems. The descriptions were precise, clinical, terrifying in their efficiency. "Look at this." She pointed to a section describing orbital bombardment techniques. They didn't just fight on planets. They fought in space, around moons, near stars. This talks about destroying entire fleets in minutes. The Galactic Council had ruled peacefully for over 10,000 years. Every species Minji knew had evolved, beyond warfare centuries ago. Conflicts were resolved through trade agreements and careful negotiation. The idea of organized violence was simply unthinkable, yet here was proof that someone had not only thought about it, but had become masters of it. "We need to report this," Taehyun said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Though I'm not sure anyone will believe us." Before Minji could respond, her communication device buzzed with an emergency signal. She activated it, expecting a routine check-in from their research station. Instead, the face of Captain Jiwon appeared on the small screen, her expression grim. "Dr. Minji, we're receiving reports of something impossible," the captain said. "Long-range sensors across the galaxy are detecting massive objects emerging from dark space. They're not like anything we've ever seen." "What kind of objects?" Minji asked, though she was beginning to fear the answer. "Biomechanical ships, each one the size of a moon. They're moving toward inhabited systems, and every world they approach goes dark within hours. The Galactic Council is calling an emergency session." Minji felt her blood turn cold. She looked at the ancient human military records still glowing, on her screen, then back at Captain Jiwon's worried face. "Captain, I think we may have found something relevant to your situation," she said carefully. "These ruins contain military records from an extinct species. They knew how to fight wars on a scale that would terrify the modern galaxy." "Extinct species?" Captain Jiwon leaned forward, interested despite the crisis. "What species?" "They called themselves humans," Minji replied. "And according to these records, they were apparently very good at warfare." There was a long pause. Captain Jiwon's expression shifted from confusion to something approaching fear. "Dr. Minji," she said slowly, "humans aren't extinct. We're humans. I'm human. You're human." Minji stared at the screen, then at the ancient records, then back at the screen. The implications hit her like a physical blow. "That's impossible," she whispered. "These records are over 10,000 years old. They describe massive space battles, planet-killing weapons, tactical formations involving thousands of ships. We're peaceful colonists. We barely have a dozen military vessels in our entire fleet." "Maybe we are now," Captain Jiwon said quietly. "But according to your discovery, we weren't always." The communication device buzzed again. This time the signal came from beyond human space, from the very heart of the galaxy where the council met. The voice that emerged spoke through a translation matrix, but the desperation was clear in any language. "Attention, human vessels. This is Emergency Counselor Veth of the Galactic Council. We are transmitting coordinates for immediate diplomatic contact. The ancient enemy has returned, and according to our historical records, humanity is our only hope." "Ancient enemy?" Taehyun asked. "What ancient enemy?" The counselor's voice continued, growing more urgent. "The Devourers have awakened after 10,000 years of dormancy. They consume entire worlds, entire civilizations. Our ancestors' records speak of only one species that ever successfully fought them. The legends say humans were the warriors, who drove them back into dark space. Minji looked at her archaeological discovery with new understanding. The detailed military records weren't just historical curiosities. They were instruction manuals for a war that was about to begin again. "Captain," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I think we need to learn very quickly what our ancestors knew about fighting an enemy that eats worlds." Captain Jiwon nodded grimly. "Prepare everything you've found for immediate transmission to Earth Command. If we're really the legendary warriors these aliens remember, then we're about to discover what that means." As the communication ended, Minji turned back to the ancient database. Somewhere in these forgotten records lay the knowledge of how to fight an enemy that had returned to devour the galaxy. The peaceful humans of the present were about to meet the warriors of their past. The legends were true. Now they had to learn to live up to them. Admiral Seokjin stood in the massive council chamber, feeling small beneath its crystal dome that stretched toward the stars. Thousands of alien representatives filled the curved seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some floated in tanks of liquid, others perched on specialized platforms. But all of them were staring at him with the same expression of desperate hope. The lead counselor, a tall being with silver skin and 3 eyes, stepped forward. Its voice came through the translation device as a melodic whisper. "Admiral, we must confess something that shames us greatly. When the first Devourer ships appeared, we tried to negotiate with them. We sent our best diplomats, offered trade, agreements, cultural exchanges, even tribute. The Devourers consumed our diplomatic vessels without slowing down." Captain Jiwon, standing beside Seokjin, watched as images appeared on the chamber's main display. Entire star systems reduced to empty space. Planets stripped down to their cores. Billions of lives simply gone. "We have detailed records of the last Devourer invasion," another counselor said, its forearms gesturing toward ancient data crystals. 10,000 years ago, they swept across the galaxy like a plague. Every species fled before them. Every species except one. General Hyunwoo stepped forward to examine the crystals. "Let me guess. Humans." "The records speak of incredible battles," the first counselor continued. "Humans who fought without fear, who used strategies we still do not understand. They speak of weapons that could destroy Devourer ships, tactics that turned certain defeat into victory. The humans drove the Devourers back into dark space and saved the galaxy." Seokjin felt a chill run down his spine. "But we don't remember any of this. Our oldest historical records go back maybe 3,000 years, and they're all about peaceful exploration and colony building. Perhaps your ancestors chose to forget," the counselor suggested gently. "Perhaps the knowledge of war was too dangerous to keep." Dr. Minji's voice crackled through the communication system from the archaeological site. "Admiral, I've found something else in the human database. There are sealed sections locked behind what looks like some kind of psychological barrier. The files are labeled with warnings about dangerous knowledge. Can you unlock them?" "General," Hyunwoo asked. "I'm trying, but the security is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's almost like our ancestors were trying to protect us from our own history." A new alarm sounded in the council chamber. The main display shifted to show real-time sensor data from the galaxy's outer rim. 3 more star systems had gone dark in the past hour. "Admiral," one of the younger counselors said, its voice high with panic, "we have perhaps 6 months before the Devourers reach the core worlds. We need to start training immediately." Seokjin looked at his small group of humans, then at the thousands of alien representatives waiting for salvation. "We'll need volunteers from every species, people willing to learn things their civilizations abandoned long ago." "What kinds of things?" the lead counselor asked. "How to think like warriors instead of diplomats," Captain Jiwon said quietly. "How to make decisions in seconds instead of months. How to accept that sometimes violence is the only solution." The first training session took place on a massive space station at the galaxy's edge. General Hyunwoo stood before a mixed group of aliens and humans, looking at species that had never raised their voices in anger. let alone fought a war. Combat is about making quick decisions under pressure, he began. When enemy ships are firing at you, you have maybe 3 seconds to respond. Not 3 hours, not 3 days, 3 seconds. A crystalline being raised what might have been a hand. But how can we make proper decisions without consulting our council elders, running probability calculations and considering all diplomatic alternatives? Because by the time you finish consulting your elders, you'll be dead, Hyunwoo replied, bluntly. And so will everyone counting on you to protect them. The aliens looked horrified. A floating jellyfish-like creature spoke through bubbling sounds that the translator converted to words. This seems very primitive. Surely there must be a more civilized approach. Captain Jiwon stepped forward. There is nothing civilized about the Devourers. They don't negotiate. They don't trade. They consume everything in their path. The only thing they understand is force. The first combat simulation was a disaster. The alien crew spent precious minutes discussing each tactical decision, while the computer-generated Devourer ships destroyed their formations. Ships scattered in all directions when they should have maintained formation. Weapons crews hesitated to fire because they were still analyzing target priorities. This isn't working, Admiral Seokjin told his officers after the third failed simulation. They're thinking like diplomats trying to win a debate. We need them to think like soldiers trying to win a war. Dr. Minji's voice came through the communication system again. Admiral, I've managed to unlock another section of the human military database. You're not going to like what I found. What is it? Training manuals for turning peaceful populations into effective military forces. Our ancestors didn't just know how to fight. They knew how to teach others to fight. And the methods they used were intense. Seokjin felt the weight of command settling on his shoulders. The galaxy needed warriors, but the only people who knew how to create warriors were the humans, and they had deliberately forgotten that knowledge for very good reasons. Send us everything you've found, he said finally. If we're going to save the galaxy, we need to become what our ancestors were afraid to remember. General Hyunwoo watched the tactical display with growing frustration. The mixed fleet of human and alien ships moved through space like confused children, each vessel following different protocols and making decisions at different speeds. The Devourers were only days away from the Kepler system, and his forces were nowhere near ready. Commander Kim, he called to his human aide, show me the latest training results. The young officer's face was grim as she activated the holographic display. Sir, the Crystalline Alliance ships still take an average of 12 minutes to respond to tactical commands. The floating collective needs consensus from all crew members before firing weapons, and the Trade Federation vessels keep trying to broadcast surrender offers to the practice targets. 12 minutes, Hyunwoo repeated slowly. In 12 minutes, a Devourer ship can destroy an entire planetary defense grid. Captain Jiwon entered the command center, her expression troubled. General, we have a bigger problem. I just received reports from the outer colonies. The Devourers hit the Tau system 6 hours ago. What happened? The local defense fleet followed standard Galactic Council procedures. They sent diplomatic messages, established communication protocols, and requested a formal meeting to discuss territorial boundaries. Jiwon paused, her voice becoming flat. The Devourers consumed them while they were still transmitting their opening diplomatic statement. Hyunwoo closed his eyes, feeling the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. How many survivors? None. 3 billion people gone in 4 hours. The command center fell silent. The alien officers present looked shocked, their various forms of faces showing the same expression of disbelief. War was still an abstract concept to them, but the reality of extinction was beginning to sink in. Dr. Minji's voice crackled through the communication system from her archaeological site. General, I've unlocked more of the human military database. I found something called the Warrior Transformation Protocol. What is it? It's a psychological conditioning program designed to turn peaceful populations into effective soldiers in the shortest time possible. The manual is disturbing. It talks about breaking down civilian thinking patterns and rebuilding them for combat effectiveness. Lieutenant Minho, barely 25 years old, looked up from his training station. General, with respect, maybe disturbing is what we need right now. The gentle approach isn't working. Hyunwoo studied the young officer. Minho had been teaching alien commanders twice his age how to coordinate fleet movements, often growing frustrated with their inability to make quick decisions. Dr. Minji, transmit the full protocol to all training centers, Hyunwoo decided. We don't have the luxury of gentle anymore. The new training program began immediately. Instead of polite tactical discussions, human instructors forced alien crews through rapid-fire decision scenarios. No time for consensus, no committee meetings, no diplomatic considerations. React or die. Commander Jaemin took charge of the most difficult group, the Harmony Speakers, a species that literally could not make individual decisions without group agreement. He placed them in a simulation where their homeworld was under attack. Your planet has 30 seconds before the Devourer ships breach the atmosphere, he announced. Fire the defense grid now or watch your families die. The Harmony Speakers began their traditional consensus-building song, a beautiful harmonic arrangement that normally took 15 minutes to complete. Jaemin cut them off after 10 seconds. Too late. Your world is dead. Your children are consumed. Your species is extinct, he reset the simulation. Again, after 6 hours of repeated failure and simulated genocide, something broke in the Harmony Speakers. Their leader, a being whose name translated roughly to Song of Wind, suddenly barked a sharp command without waiting for group harmony. The UA defense grid fired instantly, destroying the practice targets. The other Harmony Speakers stared at their leader in shock. Individual decision-making was against everything their culture taught. But Song of Wind looked at the saved simulation of their homeworld and nodded grimly. Sometimes survival requires harmony to be broken, they said simply. Captain Jiwon observed similar transformations across all the training centers. The Gentle Trade Federation merchants learned to target enemy weak points without asking for surrender first. The philosophical deep thinkers stopped analyzing the moral implications of each tactical choice and started making the choices that kept their crews alive. But the cost was becoming apparent. Species that had been peaceful for millennia were learning to think like predators. Their young ones adapted fastest, abandoning traditional values for combat effectiveness. Dr. Minji sent another disturbing report. General, I found records of what happened to humanity after the last Devourer War. Our ancestors were so disturbed by what they had become, what they had taught others to become, that they deliberately erased all military knowledge from their society. They were afraid of what they might do if they remained warriors. And now we're teaching the entire galaxy to be warriors, Hyunwoo said quietly. History is repeating itself. The first real battle came sooner than expected. A Devourer scout force emerged from dark space near the mining world of New Prosperity. Admiral Seokjin led the hastily trained combined fleet into combat, knowing this would be the test of everything they had learned. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the Devourer ships were destroyed, but at a terrible cost. 40% of the Allied fleet was gone, and the survivors had a look in their various eyes that Seokjin recognized from old historical recordings. They looked like warriors. They looked like killers. They looked like the humans their ancestors had been, afraid to remember. The galaxy was learning to fight. The question was whether it would survive what it was becoming. Lieutenant Minho stood before a group of alien commanders in the training facility orbiting the industrial world of New Geneva. The beings before him represented 12 different species, each one struggling to understand concepts their civilizations had abandoned thousands of years ago. Today we learn about acceptable losses, Minho announced, his young face serious beyond his years. The translation devices around the room hummed as his words reached various alien minds. A crystalline being that sparkled like a diamond raised what might have been a hand. Lieutenant, we do not understand this concept. How can any loss be acceptable? Because sometimes losing a few saves many, Minho replied, activating the tactical display. Look at this scenario. 10 Devourer ships are attacking a colony world. You have 15 ships in your fleet. If you attack directly, you might save the planet but lose 12 of your ships. If you retreat and regroup, the colony dies, but your fleet survives to fight another day. The aliens looked horrified. A floating jellyfish-like creature spoke through bubbling sounds. Surely there must be a third option, a way to save both the colony and the fleet. Sometimes there isn't, Minho said firmly. War isn't about finding perfect solutions. It's about making the hard choices that keep your species alive. 6 months had passed since the Devourer return. War colleges now operated on 47 worlds across the galaxy. Children who had grown up knowing only peace practiced combat formations. Elderly beings who had never raised their voices in anger learned to coordinate weapon systems. Captain Jiwan walked through the training grounds on the world of Kepler Prime, watching the transformation with mixed feelings. Young aliens who should have been learning art and philosophy instead practiced small unit tactics and emergency medical procedures. She stopped to observe a group of Trade Federation youngsters, barely adults by their species standards, as they worked through a combat scenario. Their instructor, Sergeant Dongyun, watched with approval as they executed a perfect flanking maneuver. Good work, Dongyun told them. You're thinking like soldiers now, not like merchants. One of the young Trade Federation beings looked up with large, innocent eyes. Sergeant, my grandmother says we're becoming something terrible. She says our people were never meant to think about killing. Dongyun's expression softened slightly. Your grandmother is right. You weren't meant for this. None of you were. But the Devourers don't care what you were meant for. They only care about consuming you. The reports from the front lines were encouraging but troubling. Allied fleets that had been helpless 6 months ago were now holding their own against Devourer scout forces. The crystalline beings had learned to make snap decisions. The philosophical deep thinkers had stopped debating the ethics of each tactical choice. The Harmony speakers fought as individuals when necessary, but the cost was becoming clear to everyone. Dr. Minji sent regular updates from her archaeological site, where she continued unlocking humanity's buried military past. Her latest report was the most disturbing yet. Admiral Seokjin, her voice came through the communication system, I found records of what the galaxy was like after the last Devourer War. The surviving alien species didn't just return to peace. Many of them turned on each other, using the military skills humans had taught them. It took centuries for the galaxy to stabilize. Admiral Seokjin sat in his command chair aboard the flagship, Rising Dawn, studying battle reports from across the galaxy. The Allied forces were getting better at fighting, but they were also getting better at everything that came with fighting. Captain Jiwan, he called. Show me the incident reports from the training worlds. Jiwan's face was grim as she pulled up the data. 17 conflicts between different alien species in the past month. Nothing major, mostly arguments that turned physical. But sir, these are species that haven't had a violent disagreement in over 1,000 years. They're learning more than just tactics, Seokjin observed. They're learning to be aggressive, to see others as potential threats. The most dramatic change was happening among the younger aliens. A generation that should have grown up in peace was instead being forged in the fires of interstellar war. They adapted to military thinking faster than their elders, but they were also losing something essential. Commander Jamin reported from the Harmony speaker homeworld, where he was training their defense forces. Admiral, the young Harmony speakers are incredible soldiers. They've completely abandoned their traditional group decision-making, but their elders are terrified of what they're becoming. How so? The traditional Harmony speaker culture is based on collective consciousness and shared decision-making. These young warriors think and act as individuals. Their elders say they're becoming strangers, that the harmony that defines their species is being broken. Similar reports came from across the galaxy. The Trade Federation's merchant culture was being replaced by military hierarchy. The deep thinkers had stopped their traditional philosophical debates in favor of tactical planning sessions. The floating collective had abandoned their peaceful drifting patterns for aggressive patrol formations. General Hyunwoo received the most troubling report of all. A group of newly trained alien warriors had attacked a refugee convoy, claiming they suspected Devourer infiltrators. The refugees were innocent, but the warriors had acted first and asked questions later. They're learning our lessons too well, he told Captain Jiwan. "We're teaching them to be suspicious, aggressive, ready for violence. Those are good qualities for soldiers, but terrible qualities for citizens." The galaxy was learning to fight. Ships that had fled in panic 6 months ago now engaged devourer forces with tactical precision. Species that had never known violence were becoming efficient killers. But as Captain Jiwan watched alien children playing war games that would have horrified their grandparents, she wondered if they were winning the war only to lose everything that had made the galaxy worth saving. The transformation was complete, and there was no going back. Admiral Seokjin stood on the bridge of the massive battleship Final Dawn, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled around him. Ships from hundreds of worlds filled the space around the galactic core, their different designs creating a patchwork of alien engineering united by human tactical doctrine. "Fleet status report," he commanded. Captain Jiwan checked her displays. 17 million vessels from 234 species, sir. All commanders report ready for final assault. The Devourer motherships hung in space ahead of them like dark planets, feeding on the energy that poured from the galactic core's ancient stars. For 10,000 years they had slept here, growing stronger. Now they were awake, and they were hungry. "General Hyunwoo, are all units ready for Protocol 7? Seokjin asked. "Yes, sir. Every commander understands their role." Hyunwoo's voice was steady, but Seokjin could hear the weight behind it. Protocol 7 was pure human military thinking, designed to overwhelm the enemy through calculated sacrifice and acceptable losses. Dr. Minji's voice crackled through the communication system from her research station. "Admiral, I've finished translating the final sections of the ancient human database. The last Devourer War ended when humanity used something called the Omega Formation. It worked, but the records suggest it came at a terrible cost." "What kind of cost?" "The psychological profiles of human warriors after the battle show severe trauma. Many never recovered from what they had to do. The records suggest this is why humanity chose to forget its military past." Lieutenant Minho, now promoted to tactical coordinator, looked up from his station. "Admiral, we're receiving surrender broadcasts from the Devourers." "Surrender broadcasts?" "Yes, sir. They're offering to leave the galaxy in exchange for a single inhabited world to feed on. Just one world, and they'll return to dark space." The bridge fell silent. Seokjin could feel the eyes of every officer on him. One world, billions of lives, but only one world out of thousands. It was exactly the kind of terrible choice the old galaxy would have debated for months. "Rejected," Seokjin said without hesitation. "All units, begin final approach. Execute Protocol 7. The battle began with a coordinated strike across 17 star systems simultaneously. Human tactical thinking had evolved into something the Devourers had never encountered before. Where they expected fear and hesitation, they found calculated aggression. Where they expected individual ships fighting alone, they found perfect coordination. The crystalline beings, who had once taken hours to make simple decisions, now reacted to tactical changes in seconds. The Trade Federation merchants, who had known only profit margins, executed complex battle maneuvers with deadly precision. The philosophical deep thinkers had become master strategists, but the Devourers fought back with the fury of creatures that had consumed galaxies. Their biomechanical ships twisted through space like living nightmares, adapting to human tactics even as they were being destroyed. "Sir, we're losing ships faster than projected," Captain Jiwan reported. "The Harmony speaker fleet is down to 30% strength. The floating collective has lost half their vessels. Maintain formation," Seokjin ordered. "All units continue the assault." The young alien officers on the bridge followed his commands without question. They had been transformed from peaceful beings into efficient warriors, and they no longer hesitated when faced with hard choices. General Hyunwoo coordinated the final phase of the battle from his command ship. The Omega formation that humanity's ancestors had used required perfect timing and complete commitment. Ships would have to fly directly into the heart of the Devourer formation, sacrificing themselves to create openings for others. "Volunteer squadrons, begin your approach," he announced. Across the fleet, thousands of pilots from dozens of species flew their ships toward certain death, knowing their sacrifice would save their worlds. The battle reached its climax when the largest Devourer mothership, ancient beyond measure, began to retreat toward dark space. Admiral Seokjin faced the same choice his ancestors had faced 10,000 years ago. All remaining ships, pursue and destroy, he ordered. We cannot let them escape to rebuild. Lieutenant Minho executed the command with cold efficiency. The combined fleet chased the fleeing Devourers across 3 star systems, destroying every last one. When the final enemy ship exploded in a burst of twisted metal and organic matter, the galaxy fell silent. The war was over. The Devourers were extinct. But as the victory celebrations began across thousands of worlds, Captain Ji-won stood on the observation deck of her ship, watching the aftermath. With troubled eyes, the alien crews around her cheered with military precision, their victory songs sharp and aggressive rather than joyful and peaceful. Dr. Minji's final report arrived as the fleet began its journey home. Admiral, I've found the last entry in the human military database. It's a warning, written by the original human commanders. They succeeded in saving the galaxy, but they realized they had also destroyed the peace they were fighting to protect. Seokjin read the ancient message on his private screen. The words of his ancestors reached across 10,000 years. We taught the galaxy to be warriors to save it from monsters, but now the galaxy knows how to be monsters too. May our descendants find a way to forget what we could not. The victory. Parades on hundreds of worlds featured disciplined formations and military displays. Children who should have been playing peaceful games instead demonstrated combat techniques. Species that had known only harmony for millennia now spoke in terms of strategy and acceptable losses. The galaxy was safe. The Devourers were gone forever. But the innocent, peaceful civilization that had existed before the war was gone too, replaced by something harder, more suspicious, more ready for violence. Captain Ji-won watched alien children playing war games and realized the truth that had haunted humanity's ancestors. They had won the war, but they had lost the peace. The galaxy would never be the same. The legends were true, and now everyone knew what that really meant.